Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghty of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We trust everyone had a wonderful and very Merry Christmas on Tuesday. Hope you got exactly what you wanted. And if you didn't, that the lines aren't too long at the return counter today. We have a small correction to make, actually, in the Christmas spirit. From a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the favorite Christmas movie state by state, and we were excited that there were three states, Virginia, Missouri, and Wisconsin, that listed Die Hard as their favorite Christmas movies. And we not only smiled, we took a little bit of credit for putting Virginia over the finish line. Jim, I had an incomplete survey of that survey. There's actually 4 states in this wonderful land of ours that have listed Die Hard as the greatest Christmas movie. The one we had missed, Washington State. Folks out there might not pick the best governors and senators, but they do know their Christmas movies. So well done, Washington.
You know, Greg, I'm thinking about that. It does kind of make sense because the greatest television series of all time, Twin Peaks, did not actually run long enough to have a Christmas-themed episode. And as far as I know, no reference to Christmas in the movies or anything like that. So good take. I always liked you, Washington State. Beautiful scenery, nice people. Crazy lefty politicians, and but good job for you and good taste in Christmas movies.
Excellent. I was trying to think if there was some sort of environmentally conscious way that John McClane killed terrorists that maybe appealed to them, but maybe just with all the evergreen trees in Washington State, they just know their Christmas better than most.
Pretty good. I was going to say possibly. I mean, if you're going to dispose of lead, please put it inside a European terrorist. That's the first thing. And then secondly, they didn't use the elevators very much. Neither John McClane, he had trouble catching it, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, Hans Gruber technically used the elevator at the beginning of the movie, but he didn't use the elevator on the way down.
That is a fair point. A very good point. So hopefully... Hopefully Die Hard was part of your Christmas tradition at some point, or could still be. We still got a few days here before the end of the year. But all right, let's get back into what everyone's here for, in addition to the Die Hard jokes, and that is our very special year-end Three Martini Lunch Crystal Martini Glass Awards. We've already had 2 episodes, 3 awards each. And so after we're done today, we're at the halfway point already. And today's very prestigious categories are Worst Scandal, or Best Scandal, depending on how you look at it, Best Political Theater, and Worst Political Theater. So, Jim, tee us up here. What's the best/worst scandal?
Yeah, I kind of went with a most consequential scandal of the year. And, it's a little bit of a cop-out, but I'm just going to say everything covered by Special Counsel Robert Mueller.
Okay.
Throughout the year, there have been times people have thought about, that's the ties to Russia, the Trump administration insisting there's no collusion. But there have certainly been a lot of unnerving observations about just how many people around Trump were talking to people who were part of the Russian government. The idea of Roger Stone certainly seemed to have some sort of conduit to WikiLeaks. A couple times where they were tweeting about things before WikiLeaks would actually put them up there, which is unnerving and disturbing. The infamous Trump Tower meeting, revelations from Cohen that Trump was still pursuing various business deals in Russia during the presidential campaign, which I think begins to get you a lot closer to this concept of a conflict of interest or things like that. But even go wrapping into Stormy Daniels and the payments to her, and whether that qualifies as a campaign finance disclosure violation. It's going off in lots of different directions. People say, it hasn't proved anything. Look, even if you're getting process crimes, you're still not supposed to lie to the FBI. You're not supposed to lie to investigators. It goes back all the way to Flynn. It's ugly. I don't think you have to be a rabid Trump hater to say Donald Trump had a lot of people around him who were dishonest, untrustworthy, involved with some very shady characters. When somebody from Russia says, hey, we want to help you win your presidential race, you're not supposed to say, okay, cool, great. You guys at the KGB/FSB sound swell. No, you don't want the Russian government's help. So we will see how all this shakes out. It's very hard to imagine Robert Mueller will come back with a report that does not paint Donald Trump in a very bad light. It may or may not point out to any collusion with the Russian government, but we've already seen a lot of talking to a lot of folks that should have been waving red flags around the Trump organization. So not encouraging, undoubtedly consequential, and maybe we don't know how history books are going to remember the Trump administration, but it's very hard to believe that this part will not be a significant chapter when all is said and done.
Yeah, a lot more to play out on that probably in 2019. We will see. Jim, for mine, I think, first of all, I would agree with you, but for the sake of spicing things up and a little different idea here, I'm going to take us a little bit back to Monday when I named Josh Hawley the rising political star. One of the reasons I mentioned that he's a rising political star is because he was willing to confront a member of his own party who was a rising political star of his own. That was Republican Governor Eric Greitens, who won that job in his early 40s in 2016, won the governorship in Missouri. Former Navy SEAL, business owner, seemed to be one of the brightest rising stars, not only in Missouri politics, but in national politics. A guy who, within 8 or 12 years probably could have been very much on the minds of many conservatives to be a presidential candidate. In fact, a lot of the policies he pursued in his brief time as Missouri governor were pretty darn conservative, and you could see why people had voted for him. However, it came to light not too long into his administration that he had carried on an extramarital affair with his hairdresser during the campaign back in 2015 at some point. He hid that, and then also during the course of that affair, he got her into a state of undress, blindfolded her, took a picture, and essentially threatened her, according to her and this woman's estranged or now ex-husband, that he would use it to humiliate her if she ever talked about the fact that she had had an affair with the guy running for governor. Then, of course, came the allegation that Josh Hawley was looking into as Attorney General, that Greitens had started mixing donor lists with personal lists and all sorts of other things. And it really got ugly. And finally, Eric Greitens finally decided to resign. I think he was pushed out in order to potentially avoid some criminal charges. But sad that someone who seemed to have a bright political future was so corruptible. But he was, and he's gone. And it was a pretty big scandal, and one that conservatives are hoping not to repeat anytime soon.
Maybe the most cringe-inducing scandal of the year. Although I guess you could say, Greg, I learned something from it. Among them, apparently I've been doing pull-ups wrong my entire life.
Yeah, that's not the most common pickup line. Let me show you how to do a proper pull-up. But
a lot more equipment involved than I thought. I thought I just needed the bar. But look, he's gone. Hopefully we can all, chuckle at this. Head, perhaps a good way of putting it. So.
Yeah. You don't want to know too many people's proclivities, especially if they're running for office. But sometimes you need to. And in this case, we did. Jim, let's get to some better fare, hopefully, with the best political theater of 2018.
I'm going to classify this as most consequential, and it had some very good parts to it. I don't think anything was more dramatic than the testimony of Brett Kavanaugh during the second round of testimony in his confirmation hearing for Supreme Court Justice. Christine Blasey Ford undoubtedly was that. I think Kavanaugh's response, which, a couple of folks on the left said, oh, my goodness, he was so angry. He was furious. He was out of control. Why couldn't he be calm as he was being accused of serious crimes? Look, he stood up for himself in a way that I think a lot of people feel like they would react themselves. That when you're accused of some pretty heinous crimes, even if it's a long time ago, and they're not true, damn right you're going to get angry. Damn right you're going to get pissed. Damn right you're going to see passion, because most people value their reputation and are horrified at the thought of being associated with something like that. So now the interesting thing is that, Supreme Court justices, unless they choose to give a speech or some sort of public interview, occasionally you see like the Ruth Bader Ginsburgs of the world on late night television. By and large, you don't hear from them very much. They speak during during the questioning during Supreme Court cases. Sometimes they read aloud some of the points of their decisions when they issue a decision. But by and large, you don't see Supreme Court justices on television very much. So it's kind of fascinating to see Brett Kavanaugh and to see emotion from a potential Supreme Court justice. So I don't know if this turns into a rising star or something like that. I'm very glad he's on the Supreme Court. I think it really did force the country to have some serious conversations about when do you believe an accuser and when do you not. We undoubtedly want every victim to get justice. At the same time, though, we know we live in a world where false accusations occur. So the question is, how do you sort this out? And the other thing which is very strange is that we've had trials of the century, thinking back to the OJ trial and, who do you believe, things like that. But those were trials. This, as many people emphasize, was not a trial. It was a confirmation vote. And there was this interesting argument about, is the standard lower or higher for a Supreme Court confirmation vote? I think a lot of folks would point out that when you have no other witnesses, the people you name who are witnesses do not corroborate your story. You can't remember exactly when the crime occurred. You can't remember exactly where the crime occurred. You probably don't get a criminal conviction in circumstances like that. I believe that, justice was ultimately done. I hope Christine Blasey Ford goes on and lives a long and happy life and never has to, have any further feelings of trauma from all this. But in the end, I think this is one of the biggest and most consequential political moments of the year, and I think one that demonstrated how much people are eager to believe the worst about people they politically disagree with.
Excellent choice, Jim. I remember that you and I spoke after Christine Ford's testimony, and we were wondering at that point if he could survive. And then he came out with that very passionate defense. And my choice for Best Political Theater of the Year kind of piggybacks on that, because as folks will remember, all the questioning on the Republican side for Christine Ford came from that sex crimes prosecutor out of Arizona who was very matter-of-fact. She had to do it in 5-minute increments, which was kind of awkward. And then the Republicans started to do the very same thing in questioning Kavanaugh. Chuck Grassley ceded his time, and then Orrin Hatch ceded his time, and then it was Lindsey Graham's turn. And I still remember Chairman Grassley saying Senator Graham. He didn't mention going back to, I think her name was Rachel Mitchell. And Lindsey Graham, I think most folks know what's coming here, just lit up the Democrats and their handling of Ford's letter to Dianne Feinstein.
Did you meet with Senator Dianne Feinstein on August 20th?
I did meet with Senator Feinstein.
Did you know that her staff had already recommended a lawyer to Dr. Ford?
I did not know that.
Did you know that her and her staff had this allegations for over 20 days?
I did not know that at the time.
If you wanted an FBI investigation, you could have come to us. What you want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. You said that, not me. You've got nothing to apologize for. When you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsey said hello, because I voted for them. I would never do to them what you've done to this guy. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy. Are you a gang rapist?
No.
I cannot imagine what you and your family have gone through. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham, that you knew about it and you held it. You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. None. She's as much of a victim as you are.
Jim, it had to be said. Some of us were a little surprised it came from Lindsey Graham, but that was a powerful, powerful moment.
Absolutely. My dad will tell anyone who will listen that there were quite a few local county parties in South Carolina who had, issued various proclamations wanting to denounce Lindsey Graham over the years for not voting this way or that, or not being sufficiently conservative or cooperating with Democrats too much. Lindsey Graham did a tour through a whole bunch of the southern part of South Carolina. And my dad's telling me that he got roaring standing ovations everywhere he went. So Lindsey Graham did himself a lot of good, reasserted, and I think also he seems happier. I think he laid out in a couple of other comments from that era that that time period that for all of his criticisms of Kagan and Sotomayor, he ended up voting for them because he believed in this philosophy that, look, I don't have to agree with the Supreme Court nominee to believe whether they're qualified. If they are qualified, I choose. I'll vote for them. And Lindsey Graham learned the hard way. Really, other than Joe Manchin, not a single Democrat felt the same way. And these are the new rules. And all right, fine. I mean, now nobody is, it's no longer, is this person qualified? Does this person have a good record as a judge, et cetera, et cetera? It's now, am I likely to agree with the decisions this judge is going to make? And my suspicion is that will be the standard for voting for Supreme Court justices for a very long time.
All right, Jim, on to worst political theater of 2018.
I think the moment that I found simply most embarrassing and the most indicative of how far down the wrong path we can go in this country came when Scott Kelly, he's a retired American astronaut, multiple space flights under his belt, the one married to Gabby Giffords, apologized after quoting Winston Churchill and calling him one of the greatest leaders of modern times. And this is on Twitter. He says, "I did not mean to offend by quoting Churchill. My apologies. I will go and educate myself further on his atrocities, racist views, which I do not support. My point was we should come together as one nation. We are all Americans. That should transcend partisan politics." First of all, you've been out in outer space. You don't have to apologize to anybody, particularly some snot-nosed millennial who only knows one chapter of the history book. We're apologizing for Winston Churchill now? Seriously? I mean, if there's anybody in the world who had the stature to say, go stick it where the sun don't shine, punk, all right? You need to apologize to you for quoting him or anybody. The idea that Winston Churchill is considered as, some sort of hateful symbol or divisive. I mean, good heavens. Yeah, so that was probably, I think, the worst moment. And just seeing Scott Kelly, married to Geraghty Gibbons, by no means a figure on the right, bowing and scraping and groveling before the PC crowd was probably one of the most appalling moments of the past year, Greg.
Good choice. I'm glad you highlighted one of those episodes, and especially someone as prominent as Kelly, because those episodes come at us so fast and furious, they all start to jumble together, and we can't even remember which one came when. But to take the time to highlight one of those to explain what it's like when the mob descends is very instructive, I think, and so I appreciate that. I'm going to go right back to the Kavanaugh hearings for my worst political theater, and I had a toss-up here. I was wondering if you were going to take one of these. Runner-up for me is Cory Booker's Spartacus moment, but that's more funny than pathetic. But what I'm about to play you, or at least it's a montage of what happened right after Lindsey Graham got done. So he's, of course, just righteously indignant about how the Democrats have run this whole process. And then his time's up. And Chairman Grassley says, okay, Senator Whitehouse. And Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island says, can we all just take a moment? Do we need to settle down? Pretending like he's the adult in the room. And then what Sheldon Whitehouse proceeds to do is go through Brett Kavanaugh's yearbook and figuring out what all this different slang meant back in 1982. We don't have time to do the whole 5 minutes, but here's a montage and a few of Kavanaugh's exasperated lines spliced in here as well.
Let's look at Beach Week Ralph Club biggest contributor. What does the word Ralph mean in that?
That probably refers to throwing up.
Have you, I don't know if it's boofed or boofed. How do you pronounce that?
That refers to flatulence. We were 16.
Okay. And so when your friend Mark Judge said put the same thing in his yearbook page back to you, he had the same meaning. It was flatulence.
I don't know what he did, but that's my recollection. We want to talk about flatulence at age 16 on a yearbook page. I'm game.
Devil's Triangle?
Drinking game.
How's it played?
3 glasses in a triangle.
And?
You ever played quarters?
No.
Okay, it's a quarters game.
And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Fs in front of the 4th of July. What does that signify, if anything?
One of our friends, Squee, when he said the F word, starting at a young age, had kind of a wind-up to the F word.
Jim, I don't know if you can get renewable energy out of our founders spinning in their grave over how you question a Supreme Court justice, but we could get a lot if it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, listen to that, Greg. 2 thoughts jump out at me. The first being, so I assume that's the first time the word flatulence has come up in a Supreme Court nomination hearing, right?
At least verbally.
I'm hoping. I can't imagine the other circumstances, Then the second thought there is, you're right. I could have gone with the more ridiculous moments out of the confirmation hearings to be my worst political theater, but I do believe that some good did come out of that. My hope, of course, is that Cory Booker is never actually called Spartacus. But my other podcast co-host, Mickey White, suggested the nickname Sparty seems to fit him very well.
Hey, as a Michigan guy, and I cheer for Michigan State now and again, usually during basketball season, the less Michael Avenatti is in any way connected to Michigan State athletics is probably good. Although Michigan State athletics has its own problems in 2018, that a Michael Avenatti connection is probably not their worst problem.
Yeah, let's face it. That's really saying something, isn't it?
It really is.
For almost everybody, including Stormy Daniels, the connection to Michael Avenatti ended up being the most costly problem they had in 2018.
Thank you again to Washington State for getting it right on the best Christmas movie. Congratulations to our winners. Some of those are in quotation marks for our latest round of Crystal Martini Awards for 2018. Jim, we'll do 3 more tomorrow. Talk to you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today, and tune in again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.